Hola mi familia, ¿qué tal? So I just got back from watching Across the Spider-Verse, the sequel to 2018 Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and I gotta say, it was absolutely amazing. So for me, what you guys will learn as I continue to do reviews on this channel, I have a tier list when it comes to films. And it goes at the bottom, a movie. Then I call it a film. Up above that, cinema. And then the highest tier I can call something is art. And I'll say it again, Across the Spider-Verse was art. So Across the Spider-Verse doesn't actually take place right after the end of the first one, as some of the teaser trailers would have had us believe. Some months have gone by. I can't remember if it's been like 6 months to a year, but we're just gonna say some time has obviously passed by. Miles is older now, he's a lot taller. He seemed to kind of started to get a little bit of a groove with his role as Spider-Man in his world in Brooklyn. Some of the issues that he was having in the first movie, such as using a lot of his abilities on command, aren't really an issue here. He can turn invisible on command, he can use his Venom Blast on command as well. However much time has passed, there seems to be a lot of growth that has happened with him as a character and as Spider-Man. One thing that the movie did really well on was touch on a lot of the personal story beats of each character. We see Miles struggling with the relationship that he has with his parents and really trying to maintain that, continuing to show them that he does love them, he cares for them, and wants to be there for them as much as they are there for him in his biggest moments. But at the same time, homie's trying to be Brooklyn's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And with all those familiar with the Spider-Man lore, with great ability comes great accountability. Or whatever Uncle Ben said, I like what Miles' dad said more. The film does also give us a bigger insight on Gwen's personal life and her backstory as Spider-Gwen, Spider-Woman, Ghost Spider, whatever continuity you want to follow. Yeah, we get more of her. In this one, we've seen Gwen has become a member of this ultra secret society of multiversal spider people, the organization that is spearheaded and ran by Nueva York's Spider-Man 2099. Now for me, as someone who was really excited for this film, the character that I wanted to see the most was Spider-Man 2099. Because for me as a kid, my dad bought me the Spider-Man comic when I was like 5 years old, and on the cover was Spider-Man 2099. It was the classic cover of him falling down through his city. I'll put an image up here for you guys to see. But when I saw him at the end credits of the first movie and then saw that he was going to have a much more prominent role in this one, I was excited because out of all the different versions of Spider-Man that we've seen throughout the years, whether it was through comics, movies, video games, I've always loved 2099. In Insomniac's Spider-Man PlayStation game, the two costumes I use the most are the 2099 Silver and then the 2099 Black, which is really blue. They call it black. So to see Miguel in this movie and to see what his role was very exciting for me. He and Miles really have this clash of ideologies. Miguel is really by the book, and it's clear as we learn more about his character, he's driven by his own past mistakes and how those have become a present trauma for him today. Miles, while he's also experienced his own fair share of traumas, is a little bit more optimistic. Miles believes that at the end of the day, whether you can save everyone or not, a Spider-Man should at least try to. We also see the return of Peter B. Parker, who's become now a father with Mary Jane of his universe, and they have a daughter together, Mayday. We're also introduced to the Jessica Drew Spider-Woman of her universe. Fans of the comic books and to the animated series spanning from the 2000s all the way back to the 90s should be pleasantly surprised by a lot of different cameos that will appear. Mainly one being Ben Reilly. And for me, I was never a huge Ben Reilly fan. I mean, that whole clone saga that happened in the 90s was just whatever. But his costume was always cool. We can all agree on that. Ben Reilly does have some speaking lines, and his dialogue is clearly an homage to some of the edgy 90s dialogue from the comic books back in the day. Some people will like it, some people won't. It's whatever. One thing I really appreciated that they did with the narrative of this movie is that it respects the rules of its own universe, and it really does tie in things with the first movie. There's a true core and respect to these characters in this world that they've built within the Spider-Verse. Every character's personal stakes, views, and ideologies are something that everyone can really relate to, and you can really understand where everyone is coming from. There's moments in this movie, mainly between the conflict of Miles really finding his footing in this world with different Spider-Men, that honestly for me really pulled at my emotions. You're really rooting for this kid to prove himself and to show everyone that there is a way to save everybody. But at the same time, we're following Miles' story, so we're rooting for him and his goals at the end of the day. Now, one point I really have to tackle as someone who is a huge lover of art, what endeared everyone to the first Spider-Verse movie was obviously its art direction and animation. When I saw that movie for the first time in 2018, I fell in love with its direction, its vision, its artistic style, Everything about it was something I hadn't seen before, like so many people. And everything that was so beautiful visually in the first movie, it became sublime in its sequel. It's still the style that Spider-Verse has really coined, but somehow they've made everything just better. One thing that was really appreciative was when you see the different universes, from Gwen's to India Spider-Man, to Miguel's and Miles himself, they're also very distinct without feeling like you're watching a different movie. How they were able to pull that off is just absolutely incredible. And I think it can show Hollywood that there is still a place for animation at the box office, besides the movies that we know Pixar and DreamWorks are gonna put out. Across the Spider-Verse is handled with so much care. It doesn't hold your hand throughout the web swinging. It allows you to jump off that building with the story, and it truly just lets you free fall. One thing that I can say was that the villain was handled perfectly. There's this gag that Spot is just a typical villain of the week and not really something to be taken seriously. The story and the characters go out of their way to point that out to you, but as any believable antagonist, he has motivations and drives that are real to him. And there are actual moments where this villain feels horrifying. And you're sitting there like, okay, Miles, we need to figure this out now. With all that in mind, the movie does clock in at about 2 hours and 30 minutes, roughly. There was not one moment throughout the film where I actually felt that the movie was that long. There's a lot of movies where they're long and that runtime begins to wear on you. And I'm not saying this as a criticism, but movies like anything Zack Snyder does or Christopher Nolan, you can kind of just be sitting there like, this movie is still going. But Across the Spider-Verse is such a thrill ride that by the end of it, you're ready for another 3 hours. And I haven't even discussed the cliffhanger. The ending is going to leave you wanting to sit in that theater and demand that they bring you Beyond the Spider-Verse right now. As of this video, Beyond the Spider-Verse is slated for March of 2024, and I want them to take their time with it. There's really no rush. This movie was originally supposed to come out in October of 2022, and the creative team decided to push it back because visually they didn't think the movie was where it needed to be. And again, as somebody who really respects the creative and artistic process, I was fully supportive of that. And speaking of the creative process, the soundtrack for this movie was absolutely amazing. I think Metro Boomin really did his thing and brought in a talented group of artists to help with the soundtrack of this movie. I can't say that there is a track that's better than Sunflower or What's Up Danger, but I think my standout tracks would be Annihilate, Self-Love, Calling Me, and Hummingbird. So if you haven't given the actual full soundtrack by him a listen, I would do it. It's really good. I might do an actual real spoiler talk review after this video. Let me know in the comments if that's something you guys would be interested in. But I think overall this movie, in my opinion, was a 10 out of 10. There's going to be a lot of talk on where this ranks on two different lists. One is going to be of greatest comic book movies of all time. The other one is going to be on all the Spider-Man movies. And in the case of Spider-Man movies, there's a case being made that this is the greatest Spider-Man movie of all time. If yours is the original Spider-Man 2 from the Raimi trilogy, I'm not mad at that. Spider-Man 2 is one of the greatest comic book movies of all time. That's not up for debate. There's a case that this is a top 3, if not top 5, greatest comic book movie of all time. Especially considering the recent run of Marvel movies and projects lately. Again, there's just been a great care and respect for the story of Miles. If you're not ready to crown it above Spider-Man 2 yet, I think the reason why some people would be a little hesitant to that is because this movie ends on a cliffhanger. It is a very strong story, don't get me wrong. It is really telling a complete narrative that it's trying to tell, but because we know it ends on a cliffhanger, the movie itself does hinge on how great of a story Beyond the Spider-Verse is going to be. That might be the only thing that holds it back. I think I might have already said it at the beginning, but my final grade for Across the Spider-Verse on a scale from movie to art is art. And with that, damas y caballeros, there's going to be more content like this coming in the future. And with that,
what's up, Danger?